some contributions from folks all over the world during the global sprint last year. I will go ahead, let's go ahead and let's see, line 64, if you click on that link, it'll take you to our overall GitHub repository for open data training. And if you scroll down into the README, you'll see that there are links there for primers and instructor guides. So for the open data training, there are actually two parts. The primers are currently in a Gitbook format. You can see all the topics that we'll discuss down the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is the actual content. This is a text-based primer. It's designed for anybody who has any interest in learning about open data, no matter what their level of experience is. And it walks through different topics related to open data, such as how to find open data, why you should be interested in open data, how to make your data available for other people to access. And then the second link back in the Open Data Training Program repository is for the instructor guides. And the instructor guides, 5 titles of the primers that are in the Gitbook. Right now, only the first one is live, but the instructor guides are designed to provide an introductory level for teaching other people about open data. And they are based off of a lot of the information that's in the primers, but they also include exercises and discussion points. So if there's anybody out there that wants to teach other people about open data, this kind of gives you a pre-packaged way to do that. Did I miss anything, Dana?
I don't think so, and I just want to mention that Christy's course is designed to run on a semester or quarter basis as an official course, and Christy was able to get it listed and in her course catalog, and she's run it, I think she's running it her second time now, or just finished it last fall. But the materials are also well suited because they're so detailed and contain activities and code samples and suggestions about where to find data. They're really well suited if you're starting a study group and you don't really have a lot of sort of structured lessons that you're generating yourself, or you're not seeing lessons that work for you on the study group repo, and you just want to take this course and try it out with a study group over a period of a semester. The resources are there, and same with the open data training resources. As we add them, they are sort of out-of-the-box, awesome study group sessions that you can test. So I'd invite you guys to do that. I think Danielle is here now by phone. Danielle,
I'm here.
Oh, great.
I made it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm the old-fashioned way.
Great. You sound like crystal clear and crisp, so that's great. So we were just going through the reproducible quantitative methods course and the open data training materials, and we're at this point of talking about reevaluating tenure and promotion. Steve is on the call, which is great, so he can talk about a document that has been prepared at Oregon State. Steve, do you want to just unmute and say a few things about that?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the last time we did one of these training regimens, we had a discussion about sort of getting credit. How do you get credit for doing open science and open data stuff? And I guess for some reason we started talking about what was happening here at Oregon State in the library. We, over the last year, as faculty in the library, have totally revised our tenure and promotion guidelines to try to open them up to more non-traditional scholarly publishing. So the previous guidelines were like strictly peer-reviewed publications are all that counts, and we decided that was not very forward-thinking and didn't really reflect the types of work that we thought we should be doing and that we should be counting. And so that document that's shared on the Etherpad kind of describes our current thinking in terms of what we think should be countable and how you should go about kind of expressing the value and impact of those types of sort of non-traditional scholarly outputs. You'll note though that there is still a requirement for something like some number of peer-reviewed publications. So there was pushback from the faculty and administration saying like we need something that looks like what we normally expect. And I've just had some conversations, because I'm up for my third year review this year, just had some conversations with people about the fact that we have these new guidelines, but nobody has actually tested them yet. And so what does it look like to be the untenured faculty member who tests out whether these guidelines are actually workable in real life? And I've volunteered to be that untenured faculty member to do that. So I may be looking for a job in 2 years, and I'll come knocking on your doors. But if you have any questions about that document, after you take a look at it, or even now, I'm happy to chat more.
I'm curious to hear whether anyone else on the call has worked on promotion and tenure or other policies where scholarly output is measured by an institution. And I wanted to, the link that I have next to my name on line 66 is a link to, what is his, I know this guy by his Twitter name, which is Juan Commander. I think, well, Juan Alfaron is his name. He's at Simon Fraser, and he is doing a project where he's assessing current practices. So if you have access to the P&T policy at your institution, you should go ahead and send it to him so it can be factored into his research.
Steve, I'm curious about how this conversation was started, or how the process of reevaluating or sort of coming together to change the policy happened. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. So as you maybe would expect, our position in an academic library as faculty members is a little bit unusual compared with teaching faculty or research faculty that you would see elsewhere in the institution. And so sort of one of the things that we were concerned about, especially as new faculty in the library, was that we were being compared to people who had full-time research positions or full-time teaching positions in a way that maybe wasn't really apples to apples comparison. The other thing that we were concerned about is that as academic librarians in I think what I would consider sort of an activist library here, we talk a lot to faculty about how there are all of these other modes of publication that are out there and emerging ways of doing scholarship. But then when we turn around and look at our own scholarship guidelines, they were super conservative and kind of retrograde. And so those two things kind of came together, and a bunch of us said, you know, we really need to walk the talk, and we need to make sure that what we're doing for our faculty in the library makes sense for us and isn't some unfair comparison with other types of faculty. The other thing that happens here, and this maybe happens in some other fields too, is that the types of things that we do for scholarship in libraries lend themselves pretty readily to sort of non-traditional ways of thinking about what it is to do scholarship, right? So we have archivists in the library who put together exhibits, and those wouldn't be counted normally because they're not, you know, a peer-reviewed publication. And in some ways that's similar to, say, someone in fine arts puts together an exhibit or performance, and how is that counted as scholarly output? So all of those things kind of swirled around, and we decided we needed to rewrite, and so we did.
I'm curious about the meetup in Montreal. Someone on the pad commented that they talked about this issue. Oh, is that you, Aurelia? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So it was a meetup mostly on citations and how to get citations. And I'm sorry, I'm face muted because my internet's pretty weak. But one of the librarians at McGill gave a presentation about what not to do to try to cheat the citation system, like entering your own articles in Wikipedia as references, and some other things that I guess a lot of people do, or like salami slicing publications, which is a thing where I guess you take an idea and you split it into a bunch of different papers and you split it across your team. And so everybody co-authors on the same papers, and you submit 8 papers for the price of 1. And that's, I guess, a common cheat to achieve the level of police citations and impact factor that you need for hiring. So that was discussed, and then there were a few people from visiting universities, because McGill accepts a lot of visiting researchers. So there was someone from the University of Graz who also had their librarian gave a talk about citations and had some, I guess, didn't think certain things were unethical. So there's a kind of imbalance in the way people seek citations or try to boost their resumes in terms of what's accepted at certain universities and the international level. So that's kind of the topic that we discussed. Not specifically related to tenure, but it became a conversation about how there was mostly early career researchers, and they were trying to figure out how to integrate open science into their practice without totally stunting their potential to grow at their universities. But I'm not sure if it's totally related to what was just presented, but it was very interesting, and I believe the slides and resources that she shared are in the meetup, or they should be. So yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Aurelia. I think it's definitely related. Anything where we can talk about how impact is measured and the ways that people try to get the most impact and why they're doing that is definitely related. So thank you. What's next? Do we want to move on to open knowledge maps? Or did you already do that?
No, we haven't done that yet, and we have a guest from Open Knowledge Maps. Do you want to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I am standing in for Peter, who's the founder of Open Knowledge Maps, and I think he was in yesterday's call. And to be honest, it was quite spontaneous, so I'm not exactly sure what you are expecting or what I should be talking about, but I guess it's just a kind of a basic introduction to Open Knowledge Maps and maybe the workshop or this class lesson that Peter and Naxi designed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I put a couple lines to summarize Open Knowledge Maps on line 76. Those are my words, so you can talk over them. Oh, whoops.
Okay, cool. So Open Knowledge Maps is kind of just a scientific search engine that's trying to take a different route to this task than the traditional list-based engine. So basically our initial use case was, for instance, a PhD student who's joining a new lab and is presented with this recommended readings list or some kind of link that are publications, and then your task is to kind of sift through it and work through it and start to build this model of what the whole topic, what the research area is about. And Open Knowledge Maps tries to shortcut this process by using natural language processing and an interactive visualization of the results. So at the moment we are linking to PubMed and the director of Open Access Journals. And if you just send in any query, we get the top around 100 papers and try to offer this interactive visualization that contains extracted sub areas that are involved in the selection of papers. And you can kind of click into it and zoom into it, look at the papers, see the open access ones and directly link to them. And the big, the kind of the future idea, the big idea is to take this idea further and in the next step kind of also enable users to interactively work and edit these maps. So kind of users could have different views on the same research topic and basically kind of fork ideas, fork maps, edit them, reuse maps of other users in their own labs. Yeah, I guess that's the basic idea of open knowledge maps. And yeah, we are online. We started a year ago to kind of do it more seriously, because it started as Peter's PhD thesis. It was, I think, 5 years ago or something like that. And then we started working on it. And a year ago, Peter had a call for collaborators. And since then, we are kind of trying to push the whole project. And we even managed to receive our first Reddit hug of death after trending. So I guess that's a good thing. Yeah, Peter told me that yesterday you had a super short demo, which is probably useful. So if you don't mind, I'll try to just quickly screen share and I was told stuff. Is this screen share? No. Is it working?
Yes.
Or is the wrong screen? It's just a turtle. Are you seeing my...
We're seeing your turtle.
That's not just a turtle.
Oh my god, this is very not working in a way that I was expecting it to work. The wonders of multiple desktops. Maybe this one. Is it working? I am sorry, I need to ask somebody to give me
working,
audio
yeah.
feedback.
It is working.
Can't see
Working.
your-
knowledge maps on your browser.
The
Working.
software is not showing any.
It's working. I don't think he can hear us.
I just
The
really
open
don't
knowledge
understand.
maps now.
It's working.
You can see it.
It's working. I don't think he can hear
Is
us.
it working in the... I would need somebody to answer in the Etherpad because can't see. It's working. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so let's try the director of open access journals and kind of look for open science. And yeah, now we are kind of grabbing just the top results that the director of open access journals is offering. So the ranking of the papers is not ours. It is based on the search engines. And what we should see now is the clusters.
So very
That
quickly, just
roughly top 100 papers are the result of this clustering. So you see kind of there's a bigger bubble here. The size of the bubbles are based on, I think, even, I'm not sure, I haven't worked on the backend for quite some time. So the relevance, the size is based on readership, I think, or citations. But we're usually using citations as a metric that is also kind of delivered by the repository. And the closeness of the bubbles is kind of indicating closeness of the actual contents of the papers. And yeah, you see here's a huge bubble, open access, which is also close to another smaller open access bubble. And there's lots of government and lots of 20s, Google Scholar patents. I guess that's kind of what it is about it. We have certain features such as also kind of basic searching and filtering and ordering. Yeah, so I hope now I'm back. Cool. So I think that's, I can't hear anything again. I'm not sure why, but apparently how will we join? I'll be back in a few seconds.
So in the meantime, I just want to say and maybe Danielle, you played with this tool a little bit yesterday. You can say what you thought was so fantastic about it, but it just seems like it gives you an overview of some of the key areas of fields right away in a really easy way. Oh, go ahead.
For this monologue of mine, but I just had no audio feedback and I thought I'll just finish it and then kind of end my monologue and my lecture.
Any questions about open knowledge maps? Can people hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Just checking. Danielle, did you get some time to play with open knowledge maps the other day?
Yeah, I did get some time. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I did get some time, and I'm trying to learn a lot more about data management and understand what's out there on that topic. So I just plopped in data management and pulled up a bunch of papers, some of which I had seen before and some of which I hadn't. I really enjoy the clustering, and then I immediately sent it to a friend of mine who just got a new job at, in a new area of research, because I wish that I had known about it when I started my PhD project. So yeah, I think for me, I enjoy looking at data visualizations and trying to understand things visually. So for me, it would be really helpful. Has anyone else on the call gotten a chance to play with it?
Sounds like not yet, but hopefully everyone will experiment with this tool a bit. And I think it's super exciting and feels similarly that it's a shortcut in a lot of ways to an overview of a field in a really easily graspable way. So really excited. Thank you so much for coming and presenting. So I think, Danielle, if it makes sense, we'll move on. I just want to point out there's a bunch of cool tools under line 82. For the sake of time, we'll probably skip them. But now we're at our section in the Etherpad of Mozilla Fellows for Science and contributing community members talking about cool open science stuff. I believe Danielle, Tion, and Achinti are all on the call. And so wanted to invite you all to take just a few minutes to talk about your favorite open science topics, ideas, and projects. Danielle, do you want to kick it off?
Sure, I can kick it off. And I'm just going to start with like a fun link. I didn't come down to this part of the pad earlier, but I don't know how many of you have gotten to play around with GitHub projects. I just made a project of all my projects, which I'm going to link to in the pad. And I feel like having a project of my projects is really changing my life. So that's exciting. I also, up on line 89, I linked to, I guess I'll just move this comment down, to Open Data Day, which is something I'm working on setting up an event for in Portland, especially with everything that's been going on politically with potential loss of climate data and government data. We're planning an event for Open Data Day where we're going to teach people how to get data off the web and how to work with open data and clean open data, and then a day of hacking. So I encourage you all to look into Open Data Day and consider doing an event in your neck of the woods. And anyone in the Pacific Northwest region, or if you're looking for an excuse to come to the Pacific Northwest region, you should save that date on your calendar. So yeah, what we're planning, and I'd love to talk to anyone who's considering trying to do the same thing. What we're planning is a couple hours of workshops the day before to help people meet each other and learn some tools, and then a pretty open day of working in an area in our campus that has several large classrooms together. April 17th. Somebody wrote the word April. What does that mean? April. I think it's March. I think it's March. Yes. Oh, that's Achintia. Yeah. So it's Saturday, March 4th, and I'd love to connect with any other study groups who might be doing projects that day, or anyone else who might be doing an event. Does anyone have questions about that or anything else?
Danielle, can you say a little bit about the motivation for Open Data Day, particularly, I mean, some folks are not US based, so.
Yeah, so if you're not US based, American science Twitter is a really dystopian place right now. Oh yeah, I was just looking at Chintia's note on the date format. Yeah, right. should write it out because that is confusing, especially with 3s and 4s. So yeah, it's Saturday, March 4th, and we just elected Donald Trump, and I say we, but not me, obviously. And he immediately put a gag order on some of our environmental agencies, and so some people are concerned about data that is government-funded research data that is living in government-funded infrastructure right now. So a lot of people have been downloading this data and backing up this data. Yeah, there is something called Data Refuge, which I can link to. There are a couple of different groups working on it. I'm seeing some other people. So there's an event in Michigan with a link. And so we like to do our part in Portland and take it as a learning opportunity to teach people who may not, without being too political. Portland is a pretty liberal city, so a lot of people are very interested in doing what they can to preserve the resources that have been built up in the last 8 years. So we're going to take it as an opportunity to teach people about how to get open data, how to clean open data, how to work with it, and to do it in a fun group. So yeah, and I think the motivation for Open Data Day internationally was a little bit less dystopian and a little more just a fun day where people just, put aside their normal projects and focus on playing around with open data and see what they can do. So yeah, any other questions? It looks like there's a similar event in Indianapolis. I know there was something in Philadelphia. I'll get the link. But I'm pretty interested to talk to anyone who's going to do data refuge projects or Open Data Day stuff in their city, and see how it goes, see what you're learning. So there's a link to the Philadelphia Data Refuge. So yeah, that's about all I have for today. I'm gonna try to, if you're interested in following my project, I'm gonna try to use my GitHub project of projects, which I link to on line 97, and flesh it out so that at any point you could drop in and see what I'm working on and what the status of things are. So what groups, here's a question, what groups are you partnering with at the university or in the local community? So, and this is from Erin, correct? Is that Erin Foster? Yeah, so Erin Foster used to work at my institution, so she knows a little bit about the local, we have many different departments that have varying levels of interest in, or that are interested in programming and working with open data, and so we're trying to bring them all together. And so in there's a computational biology, and there's another master's degree in bioinformatics program, and then there's the basic science departments, and certain labs are more interested in working with open data. So we're trying to bring in OHSU. We're also connecting with Portland State, which is our local undergraduate state university. And we had a meetup in December that was organized by a local nonprofit called Code for Science and Society. And so that was an interesting meetup because it brought some scientists out in addition to people who are just interested in civic hacking and other stuff like that. So we'll reach out to that community as well as the PyLadies, R users, and other meetup groups in town. And there are also some data science interest groups in town, so we'll go for that. Ooh, January 28th, Data Privacy Day. Yeah, I would love tips and resources for that. Cool. That's awesome. Hey, look, a blog post from today. It looks like people in Michigan are coordinating, so they should get together and do it, and then write a blog post for us or something about how it went, or write a blog post of their own that we can link to. That would be really cool to hear about how open data is being used and data is being backed up all around the country. So I think I'm done unless anyone else has another question. Thank you for these links about data privacy. That's awesome, and that's coming right up. Tian, do you want to kick it off? Tian's at a workshop today. Is that accurate? so he thinks he
Okay,
can chat
there.
for this
I
section.
found the microphone. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Hey, how's it going? So, I'm on my way to UCSF. There's a data-driven neuroscience workshop, and I'll talk about some of the few things that I'm doing that's also related to neuroscience as open science activities. We're working on a few coding sprints. I just wrote a blog post yesterday highlighting two of them, and yesterday I just joined a third one, so I'll probably talk about that one soon. Dockathon is an event that's going to be out of UC Berkeley, out of their data science department, and it's just going to be a week-long event of documentation of open source projects. The way for that is documentation is like the unsung heroes of like open source projects. It's really what motivates people to use it. It allows our developers to come in and actually work. We just want to dedicate time to making documentation better, and that will take place, I think, March 6th. I will add to this as well. Then I'm organizing a workshop in New York City, which is supervised no time series sprint. And that's just to say we're looking at brain data that occurs over time. So if you at techniques like fMRI, you have a snapshot and happens like every 2 seconds. You can build time series with that, but most people just look at one image and try to figure out what's going on with the activation. So in the real time series, you're dealing with milliseconds of data, so you have much more time and much more data, and we want to build models that are actually modeling and forecasting what type of activity that's going on. So some open source projects are getting together in New York City to develop tools to apply machine learning techniques to brain data. And then there's also a global, and this is an event that will occur all around the world, and it's to develop neuroscience tools. You get to bring your own project of choice. There will also be workshops and tutorials and open source development that's going on during the hack.
Hey, Tian, I had a question about Dockathon. I put it in the pad on line 120. I was wondering if you're expecting, or you know that there will be a lot of scientists who are new to open source best practices coming to Dockathon, and I was wondering if you had any formal way that you were going to explain like what's the best stuff to do, or whether it's just going to be more informal. I'm just curious about how you'll reach out to scientists.
That's a great question. We're actually trying to pull together resources of like best practices for documentation. So we're trying to create like a nice primer for newcomers to know like all the features that you want in like developing a good API for your users, a way to document, to say what these functions do, what these arguments are, how to make sure the project is accessible to people. So we're trying to work on that, and also it's a great refresher for like seasoned programmers to like make sure that they're actually giving their users a lot of information to use the functions without having to go to a listserv or to Stack Overflow. It should all be written into the documentation itself, hopefully.
That's awesome. I'm just going to comment down there to put in a link for a friend of mine, this woman, Gina Lee, she's a bioinformatician, and she came up to me and asked me specifically whether Mozilla could develop something like that, and it sounds like you're working on it, so maybe we could work on it together. So I'm just going to drop her in there so we remember to circle back and work and talk to her about that. Chingia, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're up to these days?
Hey everyone. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be talking about what I'm up to these days, which is kind of hard to describe, or I'm supposed to talk a bit more about public communications and public engagement with research. So I'm doing a PhD in science communication, and I'm studying the attitudes of a large particle physics research collaboration towards public engagement. And I'm hopefully in my last year, hopefully, fingers crossed, that I'm done with it by the end of 2017. So a long time back, Zana had asked me to help for the study group orientation, draft a bit of text explaining a bit of the context for public communication of research. Why is it that we do it? What are some of the things that we can get out of it as researchers? I personally, of course, think that it's an integral part of doing research itself. Research is entirely useless unless we communicate it to someone, and it happens to be that we kind of developed a secret shorthand and we only communicate it with other people who are studying similar things. But there is a much wider group of people who are interested in our research, and sometimes they happen to be those who are funding your research, and not directly the funding agencies themselves, but indirectly the taxpayers and wider society. So one of the ways I think about it is that we are charged by, researchers are given the charge of performing research to generate fundamental knowledge or generate new knowledge on behalf of society. We are supported through public funds, a lot of us. And there is this kind of implicit agreement that we engage with those outside of our fields, not only to tell them, hey, this is what I've worked on, this is what I've done, but also to see what their concerns might be about our areas of research, if they have any suggestions, whether they would like to be part of the entire research endeavors. And it gets quite interesting when you look at projects that have either a direct or an immediate impact on human life. And there you don't want to be performing your entire research completely isolated from the social context without really thinking about how it might be affecting people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And also when you have bigger endeavors like we have here at CERN, which since the research is pursuing fundamental knowledge, there isn't really anything applied that you can guarantee will come out of it. But then in those cases, the projects that you're working on are these massive infrastructure projects that need to be built in order to perform the research. And there, of course, you don't want to upset everyone who lives in the local neighborhood by building gigantic structures in their backyards. So there's a lot of community engagement that comes in there in order to make sure that your research, society might not in that context be able to play a direct role in how you perform your research and address your research questions, but they still have a big role to say in how you go about building your equipment, how you go about building your facilities for your research itself. So in that link that's in there on, at the moment, line 125, there's a lot of literature that you can go and read, a lot of policy documents around the world, funding agencies, requirements, etc. We haven't gone into any of that in this fairly short text that I wrote for Zana a while back. And there are essentially about 3 points there for you to motivate doing the research a bit open, in a way that you communicate the entire research process, not just the final results, but from the beginning towards to the end, how you go about with the research is something that you're in active communication with all the stakeholders within broader society. And of course, one of those things is a bit selfish, which is point number 3, something that you probably are discussing a lot right now in the States. You can have the best ideas possible, but unless you have the support of those who are funding it, you're never going to be able to act upon them. And it's important that the publics are engaged with research and are aware of the concerns in research. They're aware of the challenges in research, the open questions, and just essentially how the scientific process works. How is research done? How are empirical data collected, and how do we assign value to significance and things like that? So I'm happy to take questions from any of the participants in either this call or generally in the study group Twitter room if you want to talk about public communication of research. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambly, all over the place bit, but I'm happy to take any questions about public communication of research. And if you want to talk about some of the literature in the field, I'm happy to discuss that as well. There have been several varying paradigms since, let's say, the 50s when it comes to the academic side of studying science communication. There are also varying paradigms across the world and different models that are in play right now. So I'm happy to have these conversations if you'd like.
Achinti, I have a really quick question. Can you give like a quintessential example of a public communication project, or is there like an off-cited example of a piece of research that reached the public in a specific way?
There's one example that I turned to, and I should really look up the exact source of this because it was presented in one of the conferences I was a part of, and I think it's something that we spoke about, Zana, a while back. So there was some research that was being done by medical researchers studying arthritis, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was arthritis, and they had had discussions among themselves as researchers and said, okay, so we have these arthritis patients and they're suffering from these conditions. They must experience a lot of pain. Let's go and conduct a survey of arthritis patients and figure out how much time are they suffering from pain during the day. So they had this research that was set about. They went gathered data from the arthritis patients in what percentage of your day do you spend experiencing pain because of your arthritis, and they got back their data, etc. But the one thing that they hadn't really accounted for was the fact that most of the arthritis patients, in fact, suffer from fatigue rather than pain. And because they were performing this research completely in a bubble without having gone and worked with the community, without having spent time with the caregivers of those suffering from this, without spending time with patient groups and so forth, that they had not reached out, they are not engaged in a two-way communication from the start of their research project, and so you go in with a bunch of assumptions that might not be quite spot on. So that was an important example of how public communication, in this case you're communicating with patient groups and caregivers, plays a valuable role in shaping the research itself. Other examples include the efforts that have been done by places like Fermilab in the US, just outside of Chicago. They have a body internally that is dedicated to engaging with the local community. So for those of you who don't know, Fermilab is one of the US national labs for particle physics, and they have they're essentially on prairie land somewhere in Illinois, in Batavia. And in order to do particle physics research, you need a lot of large-scale infrastructure, and it can involve digging, it can involve mining, it can involve all sorts of activities. And what they have there is a representation from the local community surrounding their laboratory. So if they happen to have any issue that needs to be addressed, that community feeds in via these representatives too. You don't go and ask the people, hey, what kind of accelerator do you think we should build? Should we collide these particles or should we collide those particles? What do you think? That's not how you'd go about with it, but you would maybe go to them and say, okay, we have these plans and we've decided based on the physics reasons that we want to study this kind of collisions. And we have a few plans, and here's how we want to go about building the infrastructure. Which one of these do you think would have your support? How do we go about with it? So that's another example of excellent community engagement that they have at Fermilab. And here at CERN as well, we work quite closely with the local community when we have to work around the infrastructure of the particle physics research itself. So those are just a couple of examples. I don't know if it completely answers the question. But
That's great. Terrific example. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could point to a review or an entry point piece of academic literature on public communications. Most of what I've read about public communications is very informal, like blog posts giving advice kind of stuff. So I am curious about the more academic angle there.
yeah, with the caveat that you probably will need a subscription through your library to access most of the literature, which is really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
But I'll try and find something that is, that is probably open access. There is one journal that publishes exclusively open access within the field. There are a few places that I can point you to give you a kind of overview of the academic approach to the subject. But I'll have to dig those up. I'll put them in the link here.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. That is, of course, delightfully ironic that the public communications literature would be famous. But
it's kind of some of the chats that I've been seeing, posts that I've been seeing on Twitter recently about people publishing papers on open science and publishing them behind paywalls.
That's a real favorite of mine.
Cognitive dissonance among people, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's really interesting. Is there another question coming, or does anyone else have any questions? Looks like some people have to run, which is understandable. We're almost out of time.
Kind of rushed through as well. Given
Yeah.
the time.
Sorry that we had so many technical difficulties in the beginning. I just want to point out, and maybe Danielle, you were going to say this, so sorry if I'm jumping in. Under line 131, there is a sort of discussion Q&A set of prompts, and I would invite you in the next 10 or 15 minutes. I know the call will probably end because people have to leave, but I invite you to just fill out and respond to and type into those spaces with your answers and questions. We found in the past that this kind of like free-for-all discussion is really useful for people. So just wanted to point out that that is there. And it's sort of open space to talk and exchange ideas.
And even if you don't have time now, you can come back later and add. This Etherpad will be here.
So for those who do have to leave early, or on time actually, because it's not early. For those who do have to leave now, on, let's see, line 148 is just a note that the next meeting will not be at this time, but on Friday, February 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's the study group learning call, and you'll join lots of other veteran study groupers, as well as other new folks from the orientation in that call. If you can't make it at that time, it's also recorded, so you can watch it another time. But that's our sort of all-together call, and we're going to be talking about community management, growing your community, and also running through some lessons, study group lessons, and just sort of looking at an example lesson and thinking about how it might be delivered. Seeing lots of people dropping off, but because the call is basically over. But thanks so much, and I'm also seeing lots of great stuff coming into the pad. So thank you so much, everybody. Bye, Achintia.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.